I think that in society, we are taught that there's really not much we can do. Our genes affect almost everything, that based on how you're born and your DNA, like you might as well just throw everything out the window because no matter what you do, you're just destined with this one path. And it's actually completely the opposite.
Literally, your environment at home is affecting your microbiome, and the sprays you use, or your soap you use, and of course the food you eat is affecting that internal structure, and then those expressions internally are turning on or turning off all of these things.
Now we know with the study of epigenetics that your genes only account for 10 to 15% of it, and the rest of it is your lifestyle that pulls the trigger on it.
Welcome to Super Life with me, Darren Oline, a podcast where we explore, discover, and share solutions that promote a healthier life and a better world. Together, we'll ignite possibilities, inspire change, and build sovereignty, creating a roadmap towards a super life for you and for all. Get ready to start living your super life.
That's cool. Yeah, I just got off the Shakeology train. I don't even remember why or when, but I was really impressed by that product because it had so many amazing nutrients in there and it tasted so freaking good.
Yeah.
It tastes so good.
Do you realize that I started formulating that in 2006.
Wow. That's
And I
wild.
finished in 2008. And I was traveling all over the world. So I was like, put this in it, put this in it. And they were
So
just
smart.
letting me do, because they didn't have a nutrition science team yet.
Yeah.
They just said, can you do this? And I'm like, hell yeah, I'm
You're
already
like,
doing
let's do it.
And so it was like way before, you don't know until you know, but I'm like, this is a hell of an opportunity of getting adaptogens and prebiotics and enzymes and just this wide array of botanic pharmacy, right?
Yeah.
And I took that very seriously. And
You did a really good job with it.
and it was
Cool.
and to that point, it took, and this is just kind of great segue into the many things we're going to talk about. And it was within the flavoring side of things when I'm looking at sweeteners and flavors and all of this stuff. And I'm like, I'm talking directly with the flavor houses, right? And I said, hey, make sure it doesn't have, propylene glycol and other flow agents and all of this stuff. And then they send me a sample and I put it in the formula. Like, oh, this is great. And then I'd have it tested, and then it would trigger I'm like, hey, I just told
You're
you.
like, what's going on here?
And they're like, yeah, but this is FDA approved. I said, and then they kept using it. I was on a shouting match with the CEO.
Yeah, I believe it.
And this was the first, that side of the supplement world, flavors, sweeteners, this kind of thing where you're starting to see they don't have to disclose all of this stuff. I was like, oh my God.
Scary.
So we then had to set out our own standard and then say, you're either going to find this or we're moving to a company that can. And that's really where the kind of lines in the sand. And I was able to do that with this company that was like, hey, do it the right way.
Yeah.
And so, all of these, for me, 30 years of just seeing this kind of weird, these moments where this divorcing of what was right over what was healthy and what was healthy and should have been right against the profit centered and everything else, which you obviously are in support of, to do the right thing. And so anyway, I'm really stoked to have you here in person.
Thank you.
I was on your podcast, which was such a blast.
Yeah.
Because we're kindred spirits in this
Very much so.
in this fight. And and I also don't want to even call it a fight, because it's not a fight per se. It's holding a truth that should be the thing to do. Right?
Yeah, it's shocking to me that this has, because it kind of has a bit turned into a fight.
Sure.
I'm with you on that, that I don't want to
I
feel
like to
like we're
fight.
like in this like battle, but we kind of are right now.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you were just talking about that with the ingredients. And the problem is that there's not a lot of regulation happening right now. And I think people think that there's more regulation happening than there actually is. The FDA themselves have admitted that they do not have the manpower
Right.
to regulate everything that's coming on our shelves. And so that's a big red flag. We also have science that's conflicting with what we know to be true, right? Like common sense is now being squashed by these scientific literature papers that are being paid for by the companies that are using these ingredients because they want to use them because they're cheap.
Right. Yeah, you pay enough and you'll get the results that you want. And that's the
Exactly.
weird thing is if you don't get the results, if you've paid for a study and you don't get the results that you want, you just don't publish it.
Yeah.
And so no one ever sees it. And then you just skew it in a way that's going to be favorable. And then they publish that one. And so it's like, it's such a,
There's actually a great example for this that everybody should hear about. So in the 19, I think it was in the 1970s, there was a Harvard study that was done. And you might know about this already, but what these scientists found was that it was actually sugar that was leading to heart disease, not fat. And the sugar industry got wind of this. And I know that this sounds conspiratorial, but NPR reported about this. They found the internal documents where the sugar industry, which I believe was maybe it was like Imperial or something like that, they got wind of this and they did not want this to reach the public. And so they paid these Harvard scientists off. I think it was like maybe $50,000 to $80,000. And they skewed the data to say that it was fat. Well, think about the time period of that. Then all of a sudden it threw us into this low fat movement, right? Where, we had snack wells and everybody was obsessing over low fat. And then now we fast forward to now, some people are still scared to eat fat. We have so much sugar in our food because it replaced the fat. And now we've just seen heart disease absolutely skyrocket.
yeah.
And that's a perfect example of how like industry will get in and they'll skew the data. And it's just an unfortunate reality of what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, you pull the string on so much of this stuff and it's so shocking
Yeah.
how and then we're the result of 2000, we're here in 2024 needing to unpack this narrative that has also been, in some respects, been 40, 50, 60 years running. And so
Yeah.
what happens when you hear the same thing over and over again, you think that that's the truth. And so when you challenge these things, people do always think you're a bit crazy, but
Yeah.
you said something that I always believe in too, and that is common sense. So I think that if we do it in the right way and we just are able to flip that switch back in the common sense of people, so much of this can be altered and changed by just getting rid of ultra processed food and all of this stuff. And
Yes.
so anyway, there's a lot to unpack there, but before we dive completely, I want to kind of go broad.
Yeah.
I want to get and I want to unpack like your recent experience at the
Senate.
the Senate and everything.
Yes.
And I have, I hope, anyway, I'm going to hold my comments, but what do you think right now are 3 or more things people need to do to live their super life? You can answer it however you want to.
I would say first and foremost, get out of your own way and get out of any sort of victimhood that might be there. And I know,
It's a big one.
yeah, because I think that in society, we are taught that there's really not much we can do. Our genes affect almost everything, that based on how you're born and your DNA, like you might as well just throw everything out the window because no matter what you do, you're just destined with this one path. And it's actually completely the opposite. In fact, now we know with the study of epigenetics that your genes only account for 10 to 15% of it, and the rest of it is your lifestyle that pulls the trigger on it. So I would say first and foremost is empowering people to know that they can put their health in their own hands. And there's a lot that people can do, a lot.
Yeah, it's fascinating and how if you just look at the microbiome and we're now seeing that literally your environment at home is affecting your microbiome and the sprays you use or your soap you use and of course the food you eat is affecting that that internal structure, and then those expressions internally are turning on or turning off all of these things. So
Yeah.
that's that new kind of idea that if you want to be a victim, then probably don't listen to the rest of this podcast. But if you don't, but that being said, I think, talking about the regulatory side of it, there isn't this magical government or regulation system that has looked after these foods and these products to the level at which our parents would for us, right? So no one has scrutinized these things enough. So we literally have to take this on.
Yeah.
We have to take this on, and as annoying as it is to listen to you and I talk about this stuff, we didn't create this.
Yeah. We're just the messengers.
Yeah, and so this is the hard truth of needing to face something, to realize it's not what you thought it was, and then you have the power to change something. And that's where I really appreciate your tenacity around
Thank you.
going out and like going into the aisles and grabbing a product and going bink. I love that. It's like,
thank you.
Oh my God, I would. I don't know. I've never really done it. I've swore underneath my breath as I'm looking at products, but I've never turned the camera on at the time. But I love that you do that, because it's so much. It's that it feels like in real time, you're just a person then going, hey, we're all doing this. We're all.
Well, my hope is that it will encourage people to do that more and more, because unfortunately we're now in a time, I mean, we said in the beginning of this that for the most part, we don't have a lot of regulation going on. We have a little bit. I'm not saying that we don't have anything, but we don't have it to the extent that people think. So we need to take the action and make sure that we're reading all the ingredient labels and make sure that we're getting good, high quality food and know where our food's coming from.
What would you regulate? What would be one of the first one or two things that you would regulate right now?
I would say first and foremost that we just need to get all the chemicals out of our food. I mean, you look at like the UK, for example, they have a list of additives that they allow in their food, and it's around 400. In the US, we're up to around 3,000 additives that are allowed in our food. And a lot of these additives have a lot of scientific evidence that they are either harmful for the body, like straight up harmful, or just really don't provide any sort of added benefit except for like preserving. And I would argue that that's also harmful. So the issue is that we're using all these additives in our food that just, they don't need to be there.
Right. Yeah, and there's severe consequences, especially with something that you haven't proven is safe.
Yeah.
Right. And then we don't even know the interactions that they're having on each other, on our own biology, and like it's just a really bad experiment. And if there's something that isn't, it's so much in our face. The fact that you can literally put up products that are regulated at least better. I don't think Brexit and everything has helped. I think that has created some holes for some other things to occur, but at least from the EU perspective, there's massively different and better. But it's so blatant.
It's so blatant. You also have to think about too, with countries like the UK, they're getting their medical, like they have universal health care. We're in the United States. And by the way, I'm not making an argument for or against either which way.
Right.
I have different opinions going in different directions. But my point is that the government, when their people get sick, they have to front the bill. But in the United States, we're left with the bill. And so there's not really a lot of incentive for our government to take all these out, because regardless if we get sick or not, it's not really on them, because we don't have universal health care.
Right.
So that's also another issue.
Yeah, it's incestuous.
Yeah.
In the sense, in a bad way.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think is? I love the answer of victimization. What do you think is keeping people from living their greatest life, living their super life? What do you think is from your angle? What do you think is affecting people?
I think going back to the victimhood, I just think not taking ownership for your own actions and choices.
Yeah.
And this is coming from somebody who, when I was younger, I would consider myself to have been very much in like a victim mode of like, oh, woe is me. And then I kind of woke up and was like, wait. I'm creating my own reality. And so that, I would say that's one. I also think a lot of people live in fear and don't want to take chances, you know, and I get it. Like, I'm not even sitting, you know, on this like throne being like, oh, I'm like perfect. I think something that I'm really proud about is that I have taken certain leaps in my life that I was really freaking scared to do it. But when I got on the other side of it, was like, wow, it opened so many opportunities for me. It also just showed me that I could do hard things. And I think when you tell yourself, I mean, when you show yourself that you can do hard things, it only makes you more resilient and makes you want to do more of those hard things to like challenge yourself.
Totally. What was one of those?
So actually, I would say the Senate thing.
Really?
Oh my gosh. I probably shouldn't even be admitting this out loud, but I'm going to. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my whole life. We walk in that room. It was so intimidating. I was sitting next to Jillian Michaels, Jordan Peterson, RFK Jr. in front of the Senate. It was being live streamed all over the United States. I was so scared. There was a moment, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but it shows that I'm human. I sat down and I was looking at the exits and I was like, okay, I could say I have food poisoning. Like, how do I get out of this? Because I was so nervous.
Wow.
And I was actually telling a friend this earlier today that I got through it, even though I was so freaking scared. I felt like my whole body was like, get out of there, get out of there. But I made myself do it. And when I got on the other end of it, I was like, wow, I can do hard, scary things and I can actually accomplish it and I can get on the other side of it.
In the face of it, right? It's like still
Yeah.
doing it because the mind, the crazy fear mongering mind will create a million scenarios. And the cool thing is it's not like it was doing something that didn't mean anything and you're scared to do it. It was like something meaningful. So your why was greater than your fear.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think all people can be in value of, especially when you start to go, what do you care about? What is your purpose? And taking that leap is often, I mean, I don't know if I've ever done anything conventionally.
I haven't either. Looking back, I haven't. But it's funny because at the time, I'm aware of it now, but when I was younger, I was almost on this autopilot where I didn't even realize that I was not doing things that I was doing things so unconventionally. But I'm able to look back at it now and be like, wow, I think for me, I believe everybody comes to Earth with a certain purpose. And I believe in what I'm doing right now. I just came to Earth with this purpose. And I was just being led to this path.
What was the conscious moment where it kind of was like, oh, this is what I'm doing?
Yeah, I don't know if there was one specific moment. It might have been just a couple little things like adding up to it, but
Why is this in there? Why is that in there?
exactly. Well, I think maybe the first time I really came online to, I guess just with our food in general, was I was diagnosed with a pretty severe wheat allergy, which now looking back, I probably have celiac, but we never tested me for it, and now it's too late to test for it. I mean, I was so sick that after every meal, I was in the fetal position, like couldn't move. It was really bad. And so when I finally got diagnosed with this wheat allergy, I started to just think like, like what's going on? Like, I don't know why, just my brain was like, it's kind of the way that my brain works is I want to know why. And I was like, why is wheat affecting so many people? Because I was looking around and all my friends were dealing with similar things. I mean, all my friends are allergic to wheat basically. And I was also told at the time to avoid corn and soy. And I started looking into our food system a little bit and I was realizing like, okay, wait, we spray pesticides on all of these common crops, corn, wheat, and soy. They're also the most genetically modified crops that we have in this country. About 95% of soy now is genetically modified. 90% of corn is genetically modified. They just released genetically modified wheat into our food system. So it just kind of, there was just this kind of like light bulb moment where I was like, what's going on with our food? And why are all of my friends around my age group all dealing with stomach issues and autoimmune disorders? And so I just started digging at the source, and I started finding the works of Dr. Mark Hyman, Michael Pollan, Vani Hari, the food babe, has been an amazing resource for me. And it was in that moment when I started kind of digging and unraveling all of this. I was like, this is so wrong what's happening right now. And so many people are suffering and they don't know why. And nobody's asking the questions of where our food is being sourced from. People aren't really, because we weren't taught to think about the connection between our body and the food that's going into our body. I mean, I didn't even make that connection until I was probably 21, which is crazy to me. Why are we not teaching 5-year-olds this? You know?
Yeah, because that would unravel everything at that level.
Exactly.
Right. And you know, as I'm listening, you know, we've lost so much common sense. If everyone just pauses for a second and realize that those crops are genetically modified, that alone. So you've divorced nature, and you've introduced a science that you've not tested for safety. You've introduced that into the food system so that you can monocrop it and grow more of it so it's resistant to all sorts of things, and then ultimately nature's going to win. So you got to spray more and more pesticides, insecticides, and all of these other things. And those are antibacterial, those are antifungal. So that's like, it's a blast of an antibiotic in your system. So you're blowing out your entire microbiome. And we don't even know what the hell, we barely are scratching the surface at the depths of our microbiome. So it's just this bomb that, you know, now we're generations into this experiment and it's blowing up in our face. Yeah. You know, and you know, I had a call with Dr. Will Bolsowitz, who's an incredible microbiologist and scientist. And it's like food sensitivities, food allergies. Well, of course, because they're not in their natural state anymore.
Exactly.
And so it takes a bit to, like, you're, you know, in the fetal position in pain, because it doesn't dawn on you that all of these mechanisms have been changed. Yeah. You know, and that's the scary moment, the Matrix moment, that we have normalized. We don't even, the general population doesn't, that conventional corn, that is modified on a genetic level, and we're consuming that.
And like you said, it's largely untested, you know, right. And some people will fight us on this and say, oh no, but they've been testing it or whatever. But when they introduced it into the food supply, the general public had no idea, unless if you were literally a scientist on the ground. Yeah. When we released these genetically modified foods into our system in the 1990s, largely most of the population had no idea this was even happening. Mm-hmm. I had to do digging to even figure that out. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, you think about, like, so we've been talking so much about common sense. So my biggest issue with the genetically modified is that a lot of these crops have been genetically modified to withstand something called glyphosate, which has a really dark past already. Yeah. I mean, they were using these same chemicals that they used to make glyphosate in the Nazi gas chambers and used as nerve agents during World War II. And then with Monsanto, who's largely in control of our food system now, which has now been bought out by Bayer, so everybody would know them as Bayer now, they created Agent Orange in the Vietnam War. And now those same chemicals that we were using in these wars to harm humans, we're now spraying on our food. Right. And we're not just spraying it on these crops and then it's drying and being washed out. It's in the soil that's growing these vegetables. You can't wash that out of the vegetable. It's literally in the vegetable itself. And then on top of that, we're spraying it on things like wheat. It's drying out the wheat. And then we're using that wheat to then put in all of our grain products on shelves. There was a recent study that came out and they tested a bunch of really popular grain-based products on the shelves in the supermarket. And they found 80 to 90% of them were contaminated with glyphosate. And these are like Cheerios, Goldfish, Nature Valley bars, things like that, Bonza chickpea pasta. And then we're wondering why everybody's getting sick. But my thing is, well, why did we think it was okay that we could eat this poison in this mass quantities
Yeah.
and be okay?
Yeah, and those are the most, hyper palatable
Yeah.
food. They're not to mention the ingredients, but the creation of them is to trick your body into craving more of them.
Yeah.
So it's just this massively.
It's an assault on us, honestly.
Yeah.
It feels like an assault.
Yeah.
And you think about too, so just to make that full connection with the ultra processed foods. So we're paying subsidies to farmers. We're essentially paying farmers to grow more of these crops, corn, wheat, and soy, so that they can be cheaper and more accessible. And then it's why it's the base, it's the foundation of all of the ultra processed foods. Everybody listening right now, go in your pantry. If you have an ultra processed packaged food, hopefully you don't have it in your pantry, but if you do, go and look at that label. It will say contains corn, wheat, and soy most likely, because they're the basis and foundation of all these ultra processed foods because they're cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's conventional, you're just almost guaranteed.
Yeah, it's to be assumed and expected that it has been sprayed with glyphosate and genetically modified if it's not organic, when we're talking specifically about corn and soy.
Right. Yeah.
And sugar beets too.
Yeah. And the part of the data is starting to open up around the glyphosate, obviously ripping apart the junction between our digestive system, literally a simulation of nutrients and therefore allowing compounds to penetrate into the body, creating all kinds of havoc and celiac and IBS and this chain reaction is like it's we're going the wrong way.
Yeah, it's horrifying. I learned something else about this recently that I think is really fascinating, and I had never made this connection until very recently. So what you're talking about is a newer, I don't know if I call it disease, but a newer thing that people are suffering from right now called leaky gut syndrome. And a lot of people are being diagnosed with this right now. Now, what's interesting is for the genetically modified corn, there's a certain type of corn called BT corn. And what it has in there is something called BT toxin, and it's actually in the corn. So people that are eating this genetically modified corn, they're actually eating this pesticide. And what this pesticide does to the insects is that it causes little holes in their intestines, and then it makes the stomachs explode and it kills the insect. Now, we keep being told over and over again by these scientists that BT toxin is totally safe and fine for humans to eat. But I'm looking at this and going, okay, we know that it puts holes in the stomach lining of the insect. And now we're seeing all these humans that are quite literally dealing with holes in the intestinal lining of their bodies, leaky gut syndrome. How are we not making this connection right now? To me, it's, of course, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Is it suffice it to say what ingredients or foods scare you the most?
So I'll say it more broadly first, just because I know this can be really overwhelming for people, and I have a really easy, simple trick, and then I'll name some specific ones. So what I always tell people is, I'm a realist and I also buy things in packages, but you need to be very diligent about reading the ingredients. And when you look at that ingredient label, if every single ingredient on that label you could buy at the store and you could technically make this at home. So I always use like Simple Mills products, for example, because they're really great. It's almonds, and they use rosemary as a preservative. So all of his ingredients, I'm looking at that, I'm going, okay, I know exactly where to get almonds in the grocery store. I know exactly where to get rosemary. When you start getting in trouble is when you're picking up things like Cheez-Its and you see BHT on there. Where are we finding BHT in the grocery store aisles? We're not. Right. So that would be something that I would put back. So those are the ingredients that I'm the most concerned about, the things like the BHT, mono and diglycerides, which are replacing trans fats, because companies were forced to take hydrogenated oils out of their food because we found out that trans fats are really harmful. And so they replaced it with this other fake fat called mono and diglycerides. Again, it's really simple. Where do you find mono and diglycerides in the grocery store? You don't. So that's something you would want to put back on the shelf.
Yeah, or in nature, by the way.
Exactly. In nature, another great one is, would my grandparents recognize this ingredient as food?
Right. Yeah, channel your grandparents.
Exactly.
That's a good hack. Jesus. A question people ask me all the time, and I want to ask you and get your perspective, because as we've dove into these aspects and read and studied, and it's like, wow, right? And then how to stay optimistic, right? So what keeps the wind in your sail of continuing to move forward? And then what do you believe also helps people to take that next step in terms of what they're listening to right now?
So, something that gives me a lot of hope, I actually, so I'll say this. It's funny because a lot of my message is very scary for people that have never heard it before. It sounds very doom and gloom, right? I am actually a very optimistic, positive person in my life. Like, I really, I tend to see more like glass half full scenario. So for me, even though I know all these facts, like I tell people this often, I'm like, you have two choices in the face of all this information. It's your choice. You can either choose to be empowered by it and take action, or you can choose to be scared and put your head in the sand. And I say that with no judgment, just that we have a choice here. And I choose to constantly be empowered by the information, because for me, I am so grateful to know all of this, because then I know how to navigate the grocery store. I know what products to buy. I know what to look for. And then I would go further and say that I have had the pleasure of meeting so many amazing farmers, people like yourself, activists. Like, we have so many boots on the ground right now. We have so many people that are sounding the alarm. We have so many people taking action. I always use Force of Nature as an amazing example of this. They're an incredible ranch outside of Austin, Texas, in Fredericksburg. They bought their land. It was completely destroyed by glyphosate. It was basically unplantable. There was no greenery or anything. And I've gone and visited twice now, and it is lush and green and beautiful, and they were completely able to regenerate the land. So there's a lot of hope. And also, I'll remind people, we already know the solution. And it's really not that hard. It really just involves getting some of the stuff out of our food supply that should not be there, and prioritizing things like regenerative farming that actually brings life back to the land and works with nature. So for me, I have so much hope, because also, thank God, we're not just being like, everything's messed up and there's no solution. It's like, no, everything's messed up, but we have a solution.
Right. What are some of your top, speaking of that, what are some of your top solutions for, let's start with eating first.
Yeah, I would say eat as close to nature as humanly possible. I know that there's so many other factors involved. There's accessibility, there's affordability, but I would argue that almost every single person at least has the ability to go to the grocery store, get some ground beef, get some beans, get some rice, let's start focusing on the real basics, because packaged processed foods are actually really expensive now. We've been told that they're super cheap, but I go to the grocery store and I look, I mean, a big bag of Doritos, I feel like it's probably what, $8 now. And you could essentially get like a pound of ground beef, and depending on how big your family is, maybe feed your whole family or feed yourself with a couple of meals. And you're getting real, whole, nutritious foods that body was actually designed to consume. So I would say, first and foremost, just focus on getting back to really simple, whole, real foods. We also live in an amazing time of information. If you're feeling nervous about cooking, or you feel like you're not going to do that great, go on YouTube, go on Instagram, watch some videos. It's really not that hard. And I think, knowing what we know, we're going to be forced to do this, or we're going to be forced to face an illness. So I would say that would probably be the first one. And then a lot of people ask me all the time, how can I get more involved? People forget that your own state actually has a lot of control. So look up your senators, look up your congressmen, call them, let their office know that this is something that you're really concerned about. I mean, I was just talking to Senator Ron Johnson, the one who we did the Senate panel with, and he was telling us to encourage people to go to their local congressmen, call them and let them know, because he said, like, when they get enough calls and they get enough of an alarm, they report that to their higher people, and they're like, okay, this is something a lot of people care about, and they're really concerned about it.
So you feel that there really is I mean, I do know that enough pressure, call it, if Vanny is putting pressure on Starbucks for the pumpkin spice, like, stuff changes, you see that stuff and you love that. But, like, do you think that the pressure vis-a-vis through government and these channels, do you think that really is something that they will feel if a bunch of people make those calls? And
I think so, because I mean, you just look at the history of things. I wish I could think of an exact example right now, but there are times where we've hit this crossroads where enough people make us think
Yeah.
about it. They're forced to change things. But I
Yeah.
will say that is a really great point. I don't always have faith in our government, but I'm also like, there's only so much that we have, like, that we can make a change in. But you know, something that people could start doing literally tomorrow, and we have so much power as the consumer. Stop putting your money into these companies.
Right.
We actually, on this panel that I spoke on, Jason was one of the founders of Hue Chocolate. And he made a really good point in that Senate panel. He said, look, guys, he goes, I've seen it with these companies. He said, if they see even just a drop of 5% in sales, they will change stuff because they freak
Right.
out. Just
For sure.
5%.
For sure. For sure.
So just stop putting your money in that kind of stuff and put your money into companies that actually are doing right by your health.
Yeah, and it is true. And I think I do get exposed to people who are doing bigger things, or at least involved with companies that are making choices. And even though I can't say the companies, there's some of the biggest companies in the world that have committed to regenerative ag. They're just not saying it now because one of them in particular said to all their farmers, we're talking millions of acres of land, and they said, we will buy everything from our same farmers through the transition. So they're just not in a PR campaign saying it, but
Yeah.
but the reason they're doing it is because the writing is on the wall. And with enough information, if you look, again, if you follow regeneration as this example, you're following nature's principle. And
Yeah.
nature's principle is abundant, right? So I see from many different angles, from power systems imploding to food systems imploding to, look at the reason to spray crops is because that's implosion. That means that you've divorced nature, and science can't keep up to nature. That's why they put millions and millions and millions of more gallons of pesticides and herbicides because it's not working.
Yeah.
Right? And the superbugs and all of these things. So, if we just stop these things, and then some of these entities and companies and corporations have the willingness to go, okay, our profits may suffer a little bit, but the abundance that will happen as a result, it just takes a little bit of brain cells
Yeah.
from some of those people to just do the math.
Yeah.
It's just it's tough because some of these legacy companies they don't change, and it's tricky. I'm still baffled. Like my father was a professor. He helped economic models of farmers at the University of Minnesota. I grew up with farmers. Like my grandfather sold tractors in South Dakota in the early 1900s. Like, I get it. And farmers want to do the right thing, but they now are not farmers in the old sense anyway.
Yeah.
And the highest suicide rates on the planet. It's so sad. So these systems are so ingrained. It's really tricky. So we need population census. We need these conversations. We need people to understand, and we need that economic model to shift towards, obviously, you like ground beef. I don't, but like 25 cents of sprouts can grow a salad in 5 days, So these things, again, still whole food, still cheaper choices, and without the downside of the, the economic model works when people are sick, the current system.
Yeah.
So, we just need, that continual population push of people understanding that population awareness and different choices will put pressure. However it happens, if it's a phone call, if it's just your community, if it's just your family starting there, this can and will change,
We also need some really brave people at the top. Politicians that'll say
Yeah.
no more. We're not going to take funding from Bayer. people in these large corporations that are at the top, just seeing the decimation that's happening right now of our human population. It's like, at what point are we going to say, like, okay, we're going to actually put human health over profit? And the thing is that, look, we live in a society that's incentivized by money, right? Unfortunately, that is just the reality, and I don't think that will ever change. So, but this is a really big business, and people have opportunities to make a lot of money in that way. I mean, this is a perfect example. Like, take it or leave it. I know a lot of people are really opinionated by this, but PepsiCo just bought Siete for $1.2 billion.
Yeah.
If that doesn't tell you that people are demanding healthier food, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a market to make money in this. It takes education, and it also takes some really brave people being like, you know what? I'm going to probably piss off our shareholders right now, and maybe we'll see a dip in profit, but it's going to come back.
Right.
And we're going to put human health over profit.
Yeah. Yeah. You can look at it from different, standpoints. In order for Siete even to get to that position, it took bravery to do it in that way. So, and then people, you have the other side where people are like, oh, they sold out. Like, okay, but they may be taking the money they did and they're creating a whole nother, more of a good thing in the world. And you don't know also. I'm eternal optimist as well. So you don't know if they're going to bastardize the entire formula and completely screw it up. Maybe, maybe not. But it does take that step for people to create that change. And you're right. It does it's not easy.
Yeah. Well, and it's really interesting. So Hue Chocolate, for example, they got bought out by Mondelez in 2021. I'm friends with the founders. And what they did when they made that contract with them in that sale, they made them sign a contract that they are legally not allowed to change those ingredients for life.
Amazing.
And now, what are we seeing? I'm seeing Hue chocolate bars in the airports. I'm seeing them in gas stations. Yeah. So it's not always bad. And look, it's funny because I kind of sit in the middle of this, right? Because I'm also like anti-government. I don't have a lot of trust in our government. I really have a big problem with big food. And I think it's a huge issue that 10 companies own the entirety of our food system. But then I'm also looking at it from an angle of, okay, well, everybody in my DMs that has been bitching about the price of Siete and saying like, oh, either it's I can't find it anywhere, or I can't afford it, or, there's no accessibility for this. Well, now guess what? It's going to be more accessible and it's going to be cheaper. So, we got to look at it that way, and hopefully they put it in their contract that they're not allowed to change the ingredients, and then now it's just going to be able to be distributed more. And hopefully we'll start seeing Siete chips in hospitals instead of Lay's potato chips.
Yeah. You're right. And I love to hear that, because if these companies who literally had to have cared in order to make these good companies.
I know the founders of Siete too. Sorry, and they're amazing.
Right. So if they cared so much and then are laying in, whether it's Hue or Siete, but Hue in this instance laid into the contract going, you can't change the formula. You at least can't make it worse.
Yeah.
You can improve, but you can't make it worse. And that was going back to Shakeology. We always had that. We would always improve.
That's amazing.
So we would always go, how do we maximize? How do we improve? And we would always have, we do heavy metal testing, and like we'd find stuff going, oh my God, how is this possible? We found maca in there with high levels of lead, and maca is in the middle of the Andes. And it's just quick story.
Yeah.
And this is how, if you don't test it, you don't know. Since we were testing it, we found out, and you're like, how is this possible? It's away from everything. And come to find out that there was 9,000 unregulated mining operations throughout the Andes. So all of this heavy metal was aerosolizing and then raining back down on this pristine 14,000 foot, area. So
that's heartbreaking.
Right? It's heartbreaking. So but this is the other side of things. There is not a corner on this planet where we haven't infiltrated from this chemicalized world.
Yeah.
Right? And that is so heartbreaking, because we have infiltrated the environment, we have infiltrated fish, we have infiltrated birds, we have And, you know, when I got to speak to Chris Hansen, who was the PhD creator of the blood testing at 3M for PFAS.
Whoa.
Oh man,
Oh
it's
my
too big
gosh.
of a story,
Yeah.
but she created this protocol of how to test the blood and found out she couldn't find blood without PFAS in it in the 90s in the world alive today. So
That's
her
really scary.
calculation was 98% of all people on the planet had PFAS already in their blood in the mid 90s. So
It's
so
probably
it's
even
not just
worse now.
people. It's everywhere.
Animals.
And just pick one of these ingredients, right? Pick one of these pesticides, pick one of these plastics, microplastics, dyes, you name it, and phthalates, parabens, like you just pick one. And that's where we have done such a disservice to ourselves as an environment and to the environment itself. And so like I don't know why maybe you have an answer. I don't know why we almost throw ourselves under the bus. But then when you see an animal suffering then you're like, oh my God, what are we doing? And you're like, yeah, but that same thing is in you. It's like we're actually so hard on ourselves that
I
we
know.
don't, like, on the one hand, a mom is like the mama bear. Like when she's giving birth and she's having a child, and all of a sudden, it's like this. I'm gonna do everything for my, but
Yeah.
also you don't know what you don't know, and so you know it's now your awareness is broader and stronger, and you're gonna do everything you can. But why don't we have that for ourselves straight away? Like,
Yeah.
why don't we, and why are we so flippant? Why are we having anyone argue back at us about toxins in Doritos?
I
Like,
know.
this is not a debatable thing. This is
Exactly.
like, what Twilight Zone episode is this where you're arguing with us about red dye number 40? You know, it's like,
Well, I have my thoughts. I think
please.
that the quote unquote the science has become a bit of a cult.
Yeah.
And it's created this facade that we no longer can trust our intuition. We can no longer trust common sense unless if there is a study to back it up. But the problem with that is that the science has been compromised. And look, I'm a big science nerd. Like I got my master's in nutrition. I've done it all. I've done chemistry 1, chemistry 2, biochem, organic chem, and I loved it. Like I'm a big science nerd. So I'm not even here to shit on science, but my point is that there has to be a balance, right? I mean, there's a quote that, or it's not a quote, but there was a study that was done around this where they found that it takes up to 17 years for things that we know logically to be true already to catch up with the science. And that's why you see all the time that, like, you know, people like you and me, we've been sounding the alarm on a lot of this stuff for myself, 10, 15 years. And now the science is coming out about the PFAS, the forever chemicals, you know, all of this stuff that we've already been saying and we know, but it took a while for them to do the studies and get the money for the scientific research. And, you know, but a lot of this stuff is really common sense, but we've made it, we've kind of, what's the word? We've taken people's power away.
Yeah.
We've taken their ability to be able to trust themselves, trust their own intuition, and told them, you know what? You actually don't know enough. You need to read a paper from a scientist to actually like confirm if this is true or not. But
Right.
unfortunately, there's a lot of these corporations that are paying for the science.
Right.
And most,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, and we do this with doctors too. And I am not vilifying doctors, but like, at what point are we allowed to also just be the expert of our own bodies and our own health? They're the experts of the human body, but we're supposed to work together. They're not supposed to be some god that just knows everything about your whole body. It's a symbiotic relationship where you tell them what's going on with your body, and then they're able to tell you like, okay, the body works this way, and then we can work in symbiosis to get to an answer.
Yeah.
But we've created, this like cult out of it.
Yeah, amen. I mean, and it's also, if we really realized the true CV of the traditional doctor, we'd realize, oh, they don't know mechanisms of action, of origin, of anything.
Yeah.
They acutely, yeah.
Amazing. If you have a heart
Yeah,
attack, a broken bone, like we have the best medical care in the world.
yeah. And
But if
then,
you're dealing with a chronic disease, they don't even know, they haven't even taken a nutrition class.
right. And
Yeah.
then spent a lot of time trying to demonize like functional doctors forever. And so like, but you're right. There is this thing where you can easily divorce your own knowing if you feel like someone of authority is in your presence, right? Or they're saying something. And there's many studies that show that, like a fake doctor. There's one study of a fake doctor was in there, and they have these people at a chair and in another room, but they can hear when someone says hit this button, they hit this button, and then they associate the scream, and then they go, every time I hit this button, I think I'm harming somebody. But just because of this doctor saying it, they keep doing it. So they go against their inherent, just because a person of authority. So this is deep, deep, deep. So if we believe an authority is in our presence, we will and have potential. Certainly, if we have fear or trauma or whatever else, we'll throw that away pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so that is a tricky thing, and they still use it, and it's part of the game too. It's part of like, they know better than you, and we've seen that at work, and that is a very dangerous thing, because when you go back to empowering, you make the argument of the education system.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to tell you what to do, and we're going to shove you in a desk, and like it's just,
it does. It looks like a jail cell. Like
it just goes down. If you just start to open this up, but the bottom line is, we have things in our food that shouldn't be there. We have things in our products that shouldn't be there. And the data is just ridiculous if you're willing to look. And I think, let's talk a little bit about your experience, because I'm glad that all of you got a chance to share at the Senate. Here's my fear.
Yeah.
My fear is it looked great. You spoke incredibly well.
Thank you.
Our friends spoke incredibly well. It was very compelling to the argument. I was proud of all of you. And I really hope that it wasn't a show. Yeah. And it goes out on social, see they're doing something, see they're listening to us, because listen, again, this is the realist, not the pessimist. The realist is, I've read so many studies on, they create another agency, or the Toxic Control Act. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? You're creating an agency on top of an agency that was supposed to be doing this already? Like,
what is going on?
What are you talking about? And then some company, and we know this happens, we're committing to 2027 to rid our products of X, Y, and Z. And 2027, and that news article is gone now.
Yeah.
And 2027 comes and goes, and not much has changed. So it's that kind of thing where, like, okay, how is it heard? What's your experience? What do you think the action can be, should be, beyond, like, almost behind the scenes? Like, what are they going to do about it, do you think? Like, what's your gut say?
I have a lot of thoughts about this. I would say, first and foremost, I've been in this fight for a long time, and I know you have too.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I've ever seen these types of conversations happening on a level like this.
Which was awesome.
Yeah. So that alone is what gave me hope, because let's just say I hope this doesn't happen, but let's just say absolutely nothing happens with the government. At the very least, I've never seen such a wildstorm online. People talking about this that I never in a million years would even think that would mention our food system. I mean, Bill Burr was just quoted last week, like saying something about how messed up our food system was and talked about the Senate thing. So I think if anything, I have hope that this will only spread more awareness. And going back to what I said earlier, the more people that know that this is happening and just how dark and deep it really goes, the more people will start to boycott these products. And I will say that, I mean, I've just seen this with the organic movement. I mean, in the last like 10, 15 years, organic has completely, absolutely exploded on the market. You know, I mean, Costco is one of the biggest sellers of organic food now. And all of that was driven by consumer demand. So do I have a ton of faith in our government? No. But what was really cool and interesting to see was that the senator that put this roundtable on, he sat down with us before the meeting, before we went out there, and he said, look, he said, today specifically, it's not about the solutions. I just want to open the conversation so that we can have more of these. And it wasn't like I don't want to talk about the solutions. It was like, we only have 4 hours. I'm hoping that we can have more of these. And I want this specifically to be like, we're sounding the alarm. We're going to get as many people's attention as we possibly can, because this is baby steps, right? It is so deep and it's so corrupted that we need to first sound the alarm and make everybody aware that it's actually going on. Now, I will say from a personal level, I think like, you know, when we think about big ag, big food, and all these big, you know, conglomerates, we think of this just big like corporation, right? Well, I'm starting to see it as, okay, well, there's also fathers on the board. There's fathers that are CEOs. There's fathers that are politicians. And I do know that there's corruption and there's evil in this world, unfortunately. I believe that, but I also believe there's a lot of really amazing people. And this senator included, I think, once they're aware that this is happening, I'm just hoping that people are going to start being emboldened to take action because they're seeing the detrimental effects that it's having. And I'm just praying that there's people like CEOs of these large companies that are going, okay, wow, we actually need to change this.
Who is the senator?
Ron Johnson of Wisconsin.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Hey, Wisconsin, neighbor of my Minnesota. So
nice, yeah.
Well, that's good. It's good to hear. And I think the takeaway from what I heard around that is there was exposure. Like it was exposure, and to see it officialized, if I could make up a word, right? So people could see that this was at least, quote unquote, on the table of discussion in a way that was not just you on your social anymore or you on another podcast or whatever. It was like an official, seemed more important and probably got the attention of people that wouldn't normally have listened to you, to Max, to Vanny, whatever, whoever it was, that like, oh, because the seeds are, maybe they heard something about that, but maybe they blew it off. But now that it's showing up in my feed like that, I'm like, wow, okay, so this could be a big problem. So
there was something else too that I forgot to mention that gave me a lot of hope. So before we actually had that roundtable, we had a meeting in the morning. We had a staff briefing. And there was probably about 100 staff members there. Most of them were about, I would say, between the ages of like, I would guess like 25 and maybe 33, 34. And these were all the staff of the senators and congressmen that work in the U.S. Senate building. And our prerogative was to tell our message and have them spread the word. Literally, people stood up there and said, look, tell your congressmen that this is something that people are concerned about because this is a really big issue. And so I think just putting that on their minds and helping them understand just how grave this issue is. And then I'll say one more thing that was really cool was we put this all out on our socials and said, anybody who wants to come RSVP for a seat. I think it was about 2,000 seats that were available. Over 3,000 people RSVP'd, and everybody in that room, all the staffers were like, we have never seen people show up for any issue like this before. So I think that there was this kind of like rumblings around the U.S. Senate because everybody's like, what is going on in that room? It's overflowing. They had to put people in an overflow room.
That's cool.
So I think that alone is, I think that we have that on our side, which is really cool.
I love that. I love to hear that. And that's hopeful.
Yeah.
You know, again, I think I have hope in the human spirit more than anything else. And so if if you just waken up the beautiful part of us again and turn that light switch back on and get people happier and healthier and you know they have more agency of change then at that point. So
Yeah.
what are you working on right now? What are you building? What's going on with you? What's happening?
So I'm in the very baby beginning stages of writing a book, which I'm very excited about.
Good.
Like baby stages. But I have a
That's
book
awesome.
agent and we're starting to work on the outline. And so that's my big thing. And then just getting out this message. Really, I'm trying to ride the momentum of this. Because like I said a few minutes ago, I've never seen this conversation happening on such a large level. And I'm so happy and grateful that it's being talked about.
That's awesome. Well, I love and support what you're doing, obviously.
Thank you.
And thank you for all of that. And good luck on that book. Yeah, that's books are awesome and challenging.
Big undertaking.
Yeah, because there's like I don't know if you remember like taking tests in college and stuff, and your brain hurts. Oh yeah, especially in my last book, my brain hurt for like 2 years. Like,
Oh man. Well,
but it's like you're
but it's a
doing
good-
it. Yeah, you're
yeah,
doing it observer. You're trying to get condensing things down in a way that like always thinking of the audience. Like are they going to hear this, and how could I do it in a way that they're going to receive that? It's such a wrestle.
yeah.
And then if I open up this conversation, I need this much to explain it, and is that gonna? Do I have enough? Like it's a while. I can't wait to hear how it's going for you.
A labor of love for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm excited
Thank you.
for
I am
you,
too.
and again, way to go. Way to continue to be the champion, and that's what we do. We just keep going, and I'm proud of you for acknowledging your fear and not caving and stepping up and kicking ass.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Yeah, right on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.